Hi, everybody. Welcome to FinTech Fun Talks. For those of you that are new, we are a Copper Canvas Ads Agency, and we help those in the FinTech industry grow their businesses by acquiring new clients. Today, we have a special guest, Erin Martin, the sales director of Rain. This is an earned wage access company, and we'll be talking a bit about what happens in that industry today. So, welcome, Erin.
Christy, so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So happy to have you here. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit and frame this. What is the problem and what are some of the misconceptions? So I know that many C-suite executives just believe that maybe financial stress is a matter of employees needing to budget better, or they just misunderstand what the reality is of the workforce and what this solves.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start. So I think when you look at the issue, I think the latest statistics I've read are 78% of US workers are living paycheck to paycheck. So this is telling me that it's not discriminating across any industry or wage scales or anything like that. Like this is an issue that is plaguing the overwhelming majority of Americans, right? And so when you look at the problem like that, I think the solution has to be equally as dynamic and urgent, right? Because what happens when workers can't make ends meet? They do certain things that negatively impact them. I've seen it so many times where employees are doing things like withdrawing from their 401ks, or when paydays and due days don't line up, they pay a bill and they go into overdraft protection and they overdraft their account and they get hit with exorbitant fees, or they're taking on more and more credit card debt, and they're doing these things not for like frivolous purchases or to buy jewelry or new clothes. It really is the bare necessities, right? It's to put food on the table, it's to pay bills. But what's happening is they're getting further and further into what's called the debt cycle. So they're accumulating this debt. On the other side of it, wages are essentially flat, or wages aren't really outpacing things like inflation or the cost of living. So workers are getting sort of almost compressed with their paychecks to where they just really can't live normally anymore. And that's causing added and undue stress. And so when I talk about like really what earned wage access is, it really is the timing and the access to funds. I think business leaders all across the country, they know that the unit economics doesn't work for them to just keep raising wages and raising wages, raising wages. They'd be out of business, right? But really what's going to
Yep.
make the difference in their employees' lives is the timing and the access to their money. That's what earned wage access does. It just gives them their pay when they need it, so that when an employee has a flat tire, they don't have to put the tire change on the credit card or wait for payday and call out of work because they can't get there. They can access the earned money that they've already accumulated in that balance and use it to get their tire fixed. This is helping employees meet their day-to-day needs, but it's also getting them more connected to their employer.
Yeah, absolutely. As you're talking about these things, it is so relevant in today's world. Just the amount of things that you see, news articles, even just personal posts on social media where people are talking about the stretch that it is right now to make it from paycheck to paycheck and how much more expensive things are. And so when you do have those things that come out of the blue, like you mentioned, needing to replace a tire, or if you have a medical emergency or whatever it is, those can really throw you for a loop. And I like how you mentioned as well that, look, this problem compounds. This isn't something that is a problem for a couple of pay cycles. It is something that you get stuck in a loop of when you don't have access to money that, like you mentioned, you've already earned, right? These employees have already earned that money. Now, very interesting.
Yeah, it's funny. I was visiting my parents out in California, and I
Hmm.
live in Texas, and I had rented a car. I rented this little kind of small, like sort of sedan type of thing, and I was returning it back to the rental place, and gas was like triple what I'm used to paying in Texas. But it's interesting, right? For frontline workers, this kind of thing happens all the time
Yeah.
where they go to the grocery store and that bag of groceries, it was $45 last week and now it's $65. Or
Yeah.
they go pay for gas and it was $2.75 and now it's $3.50. I think one of the common misconceptions I hear when I talk to business owners and executives is people just have to be better with their money. But you can't budget for things like
No.
inflation or the unforeseen or that medical incident that you might have had. Like you can't really budget for those things. And it's happened time and time again where employees are forced to make really tough decisions. Those tough decisions put a lot of mental stress on them, and it impacts them from like really fulfilling their best selves in the workplace, right? If you're stressed, if you're worried about how you're going to put food on the table or pay for your kids' medicine or get to work, chances are you're not going to show up and be at your best in the workplace. And that's
True.
some of the issues that earned wage access looks to solve, it's really getting a more connected workforce so that they can show up and they're not worried about the immediate day-to-day things that may be plaguing them in the past. Giving them access, giving them that flexibility is important. I mean, companies like Rain, we take it a level further. It's not just access to your money, it's financial wellness, it's financial coaching. It's like, hey, do you want to sit with a financial counselor and look at your budget and look at ways where maybe you can save or cut back on certain things? So we really want to help employees get out of this debt cycle and really are kind of mission driven and focused on the overall goal of like a connected workforce.
I love that. How would employees access that? Is that something that you have as kind of one on one? Is it modules that they can go through on their own? How do they do that?
Yes, they simply download our technology, the Rain app. This benefit is a B2B2C solution. So Rain would partner with their employer and then give their employees access to the Rain app and their earnings when they need it. Once they download our app and have that technology, not only can they see their balance and they could do things like budget, but that's when through our app, they could connect with a financial advisor, get the advice that they need. And when the unforeseen happens, like that flat tire, the medical emergency that we talked about, they have access to their already earned income so that they're not waiting till next Friday or bi-weekly or semi-monthly to get their pay.
And I can see where that would make a difference in someone's attitude about their job, their employer. It changes the whole culture in feeling supported and knowing that you have access to something very important that you need.
Yeah, and I think, I think companies, they look at sort of employee wellness and employee engagement through a lot of different lenses, and they're doing all of these sort of supplemental things to sort of help with employees' mental health. But really, one of the biggest strain on employees is financial health, and that is very closely tied to mental health and mental wellness. Study after studies have shown. I don't know if you've ever known someone who's maybe gone through a divorce or getting sued or something like that. It just weighs on them. It drains them, right? And so we're trying to help employers see really the need for a financial wellness benefit through the lens of like mental health and mental well-being.
It really is tied in. I think that everyone can relate to that. And no matter what financial situation most of us are in now, we've had at least an experience in the past at some point where money has been tight and it is extremely stressful. And you wonder how you're going to make it from day to day. So it absolutely is connected.
Rain, we have, over 2 million annual users to the platform. And there are some trends that we see because we're a fintech company. I think one of the things that we do is we survey employees and we ask them, and it's optional, but we ask them why are they using this platform? Why are they doing this transfer? Time and time again, it never ceases to amaze me. The top three reasons are for transportation, are for food, and to pay bills. I mean, this is really the bare necessities in life. And I think that's counter to what people would assume. I think people would assume that they're doing all these things and they're going on these fancy trips and buying all these clothes. That's not the case. Like employees are struggling from a day to day perspective. And when you give them access to their money, they're doing the bare necessity things. I'm old enough to remember when COVID first happened and there was this lockdown. Well, what did the government immediately do? It gave everyone a stimulus check because the flow of funds actually stimulates economic growth. I don't know if you've ever been out with a group of friends at a restaurant and a bill comes and you have five friends, and what happens? Everyone takes out their phone and says, Venmo me, send me money here.
Hmm.
There's a number of transactions that can go on in one check. But
Yes.
really, our payroll is stuck in this kind of archaic, again, this semi monthly, this bi weekly cycle where everything else in our economy is instant. And so the way people use transportation, the way they go out to eat, the way that they pay bills, it is all on this sort of instant feedback loop. And so money has to move that way. And that's what earned wage access looks to address.
It does bring it into the modern economy. It is something that it's been a part of our social construct for decades and decades to have payment biweekly, bi-monthly, right? But we've made such strides in those other ways to make payments to our friends, to utilities, just all sorts of different things. And so I love that this is changing something that is just so ingrained in our businesses. So, my next question, I wanted to have you walk us through the B2B portion and what makes it simple to integrate for employees.
Brain's client journey, from the time a client says yes to where they're live and this is in their employees' hands is less than 45 days. And when people think about an implementation that involves technology, specifically payroll and timekeeping systems, implementation is the four-letter word. They're like, oh no, this is going to take months. But that's not the case. We have pre-built APIs with the biggest and most common payroll and timekeeping keeping systems on the market. And we're in the marketplace for ADP and the UKGs and the Workdays built on Workday's app. We're the only EWA provider to say that. I say all that to say this integration is a seamless one. And so when you think of the data that we're capturing that we need to give everyone a real-time balance, we already have those connectors in place. And so once an employer says, yes, I want to do this, the bulk of that 45-day client journey is really spent on marketing and communications. We want their employees to know that there's a financial wellness benefit that's coming. Here's how you use it. Here are the FAQs. Here's who you go to if you have any questions. I think a lot of the investment that we make in the partnership is just kind of like onshore support. We want to be the first line of defense if an employee is wondering why their paycheck has this in it or what this was. Like, we don't want them to call the company or their payroll department. We want them to call us. So a lot of how you build this partnership is to like really build awareness around the benefit, how it should be used, where do you go if you have questions, et cetera. That's the bulk of the time. Really, the implementation piece is already built out and we're just flipping on light switches.
That's amazing, and I can see how that would make it really appealing to employers to invest in that and make that a benefit for their employees. That's awesome. One thing I wanted to touch on, the CFPB has ping-ponged on its stance around what earned wage access is, and so how has that uncertainty impacted the industry in general?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what that does, and I've had these conversations pretty frequently with employers, it just pauses their decision making process. It's kind of like, well, especially for larger employers that may have swaths of employees in certain states, you got to remember wage and hour laws vary across state to state, right? There's no sort of one size fits all. There are certain states like California that may be more sort of pro employee, and other states it may flip, right? And so the CFPB rulings, the sort of ping pong with the CFPB rulings, it just gives people pause to say, hey, let's wait until the regulatory landscape is certain on this. I can tell you one thing outside of the employer partners that Rain services, this industry, just in general terms, has reached a critical mass. And the overwhelming majority of US employers are doing some form of EWA. When you think of the biggest employers in the country, I don't need to name any names, but we could all see the logos in our mind. You're
Yeah,
talking about millions and millions of people are using this service, not from Rain, but just from the industry in general.
in general.
There's not going to be any regulatory ruling that's going to negatively impact them. And the analogy I always use is kind of like 401ks. It's like
Right.
back many years ago when 401k was first written, lawyers went crazy, but really that was written out of our tax law. And so businesses started offering it to employees. And then before anyone can see what was what, the train had left the station and so many people were offering it and using it. It's kind of the same with earned wage access. I think forward thinking, as you and I talked about, like how the flow of funds are working with technology. Generally speaking, I think lawmakers are looking at fintech companies, earned wage access companies really favorably because they know sort of traditional banks and things like that. It's now not really what the future is. It's kind of neobanks and younger folks don't really even have bank accounts, right? They're using Venmo, they're using neobanks. And so whatever rulings are going to come out of it are going to be super favorable to earned wage access company and fintech companies as a whole.
That makes sense. A lot of change there, and I'm thinking back to what you were mentioning where you want to take the burden off of the employer in general to take their calls and to be the point of contact for the employees when they have issues and concerns about their play. There's always a time when there's questions on those things for everybody, and I think that that also makes us really inviting to them as well. In addition, as you mentioned, the differences in each state's rules and legislation on payments. I'm wondering for decision makers that are looking to explore earned wage access or financial wellness solutions, because I know that you do both, what's the biggest piece of advice that you have before choosing a partner?
Oh, that is such a great question. I think one of the things I always say is kind of begin with the end in mind. Like, what do you hope
Mm,
to accomplish out of this benefit? What are you looking to achieve? What does the user experience look like? What are your employees going to say about this? Like blue sky this for me. What does their perfect solution look like? And then kind of work backwards from there. The interesting thing about the EWA market is it's just so robust and dynamic. There are every time you turn around, there are 60 plus competitors in the market. There are white label solutions, banks have embedded solutions now, HCM platforms. I mean, you name it. There are so many things on the marketplace. I think an employer has to ask herself, what are they looking for? What is the user experience going to be? And why am I doing this and why now? I think when you answer those questions, you can find your ideal vendor. But I always say this to anyone that's in an evaluation. I always recommend that they look at multiple vendors. Not
Mm.
all are created equally. Things differ from the flow of funds to the way that your employees would interact with the app to the integration to the cost. I think one of the things the CFPB looked to combat was predatory practices where you're charging employees exorbitant fees to access their money. So
Yeah.
you want to know, does the vendor have free options? Is it clear pricing? Is it low cost? Or are my employees getting charged per month or they're getting charged $10 to take out a like you have to assess all these things. And because the landscape is so dynamic, you really have to begin with the end in mind of what am I looking for and why? And then we can help you navigate to the right solution. I think on its surface, whenever an employer evaluates the benefit, whether they go with Rain or someone else, I always tell them, I'm really happy that we're at this point because you're going to give your employees better flexibility and a financial wellness benefit they're going to use. Typically with Rain, we see about a 45% adoption rate, almost half employees, and it doesn't matter the industry. It could be healthcare, it could be manufacturing, doesn't matter. Half your employees are going to be using this. I'm happy that you're looking at it because it's going to change the trajectory of your company. People are going to be with you longer. They're going to be more engaged. So whether they pick Rain or someone else, I mean, obviously I'm biased. I want them to go with Rain, but just on its surface, it's a good benefit for their employees to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that you mentioned to start with the end in mind because it sounds like there are a lot of moving parts, a lot of variables between the different solutions. And so doing their homework could end up being really complicated. And so this is a way to simplify that in a major way.
Yeah, I think of it like it's a decision you only want to make once, right? It's like,
True.
oh, I looked at all these vendors. This is what I wanted to achieve. Here's the best path forward. Now let me loop in my CFO, my payroll team, or whoever. This is where we're going with. Poke holes in it. Any objections? Because once we set this in place, our employees are going to use it, and we don't want to have to do this again in 6 months.
You sink a lot more money in doing that than taking your time to find the right solution from the start. So I want to shift gears just a bit because you have experience as a sales director with recruiting, because recruiting has been such a unique landscape for the past, I would say, 2 years or so. And you've mentioned that hiring the right people doesn't necessarily mean that they need to have fintech experience. So what qualities do you look for instead?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's so funny because in the interview process, you're trying to identify certain things. Again, I always begin with the end in mind of a lot of things that I do, but certainly in onboarding and recruiting. So one of the things I look for is this candidate coachable? When you think about what strategic sales really is, it doesn't really have anything to do with hitting a quota. That's what everyone thinks it is. It's like, oh, I just gotta hit a quota and make 100 dials, blah, 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 right? It's really not that. It's really strategic selling is the act of getting better constantly, just getting better every single day. And so I look for someone who's coachable. One of the questions that I ask in every interview process is, how do you develop your craft? What books do you read? What podcasts do you listen to? Who do you hang around that gives you advice? Do you have mentors? How do you get better at your craft? And it's very telling. And usually AEs or sales executives that have all only internal sources, well, I look to myself and I usually don't bring those people on. It's the ones that have external sources that are getting them better and helping to sharpen their craft. So I look for someone who's coachable and is really obsessed with getting better. And then the second thing I always look for is someone who's competitive, not like cutthroat competitive, but just wants to get better and wants to win. I've never had a scarcity mindset in sales. I think there's enough for all of us to do really well. And I don't have a scarcity mindset as a leader, but I'm looking for someone who wants to be competitive and like wants to get better. And the way that I assess that is I ask a couple of leading questions. I think one of the questions I ask is, okay, so tell me about the biggest deal that you close. What did you do? How did you do it? What did you learn? And all the sales reps, they tell me about these big deals and these whales. And then I say, okay, tell me about a big deal that you lost. What'd you do? What'd you learn? Just an interesting juxtaposition, right? Because I want them to think of both ways of looking at it. And then when they tell me that, I was like, okay, what feels better? Does losing feel better, or does winning feel better, or does losing feel worse? And so I want the competitor in them to be like, okay, why am I winning? Why am I doing this? How am I doing it? So I'm trying to assess their really competitive flame in their fire and how they're doing their day to day role. But ultimately, I think the biggest thing, taking all that, the coachable, being a competitor, the biggest thing is, and this is my third C, a culture fit, right? Is that person going to be a culture fit? I don't want to have a sort of lone wolf who's going to get me to 110% to quota, but isn't a good team player, always has their camera off, doesn't help others. I would rather have someone who's at 85% to quota, who's great on calls, who's willing to teach other people, who's willing to team sell and help each other out. My core philosophy as a leader is like we win and lose together. And so I want someone who shares that same belief. I know that was a lot, and it's typically hard to assess in a 30-minute interview. So
Yeah.
typically, when before I bring on a candidate, I don't make any decision in isolation. I interview them first, I take a bunch of notes, and then I share it with my team. I have them sit with an AE to do a day in the life. I have them speak to one of my executive leaders. And then I take all of that feedback and I try to make an informed decision. Even with that, like you get things wrong, but I try to do it in a way that is fair to everyone and just gives clarity to the process. Building good teams and good cultures is something that I'm always trying to refine in my process as a leader.
It sounds like a very thoughtful approach and one that you've put a lot of time and thought into based on past experiences that helps you to get the right people. Like you said, it's never 100%, but you have the framework in place that make it less likely that you're going to make a misstep. I also wanted to mention, I really appreciate that your definition of competitive isn't necessarily that cutthroat vibe. That's something that I think is so prevalent in sales and in how people look at sales in general. But that constantly learning and being pushed to grow and change is beneficial for everybody, no matter what role you're in. I did want to ask you, AI has taken such a huge role with recruiting these days, and it cuts people out based on those keywords. And so, are you finding it harder to target the right people based on these qualifications that you're looking?
Yeah, so a lot of those AI tools, they do make our life easier in a lot of different ways, but they also like eliminate a lot of like the human experience of it. So when I build a team or when I have open roles, the biggest source that I go to is referrals. I want to know that someone knows someone and can vouch for them. And I really drill down on like some of the weak areas in that person. If you know them, hey, Christy, what does so and so do well? What do they really struggle with? Not because I want to point that out in an interview process, but I want to start thinking in my mind, like, how can I coach and develop that person if they really do struggle with XYZ, right? And so I say all that to say, I think what AI tools have done really in top of funnel, when you think about prospects and you think about candidates that you might hire, it's
Mhm.
really exclusionary in my
I agree.
right in my experience. Like it's excluding candidates, right? There are so
Yeah.
many things that like and I think one of the questions that I always ask is, I have multiple screens and I have their resume pulled up when I'm doing a virtual interview. And I'm like, tell me something that's not on that your resume doesn't tell me. I'm reading it here. Like, tell me something outside this. And AI doesn't do that. So when I say it's removing the human connection, it really is. Like a person's resume might not have certain keywords or phrases and it might not get past the initial screening, but that may be a really great candidate. So I look
Yeah.
for referrals first, and then I always, I kind of open my portal and look for certain key things on a resume, even if it's not highly recommended. I'm looking for certain key things on a resume that I know are really good skills that I like to either learn more about or develop. Ultimately, this process is a lot like sales, and in sales, you buy from who you like. And like
Mhm.
if I have a good interview with someone and I think they have the qualities I can either develop or they're there, I tend to put them through the next phase of like meeting with a rep and meeting with an executive leader. So it really is a part art and part science, if that makes any sense.
It really does. And it sounds like you're quite hands on in the process. And again, very intentional. And I have to say, from my perspective, I wouldn't be where I am today without people like you who gave me a chance where I didn't necessarily have experience in the fintech industry, or maybe I didn't have all of the requirements for a specific role, but they said, but you have the right qualities to get you there. And it's made all the difference in my career. And it helps you get those people who are, I guess, hungry in a sense and really willing to take those steps and grow, like we mentioned before, where you're growing and constantly learning. One final question for you. If you had advice for someone who is trying to get into the fintech industry or even in this specific earned wage access industry, what would that be?
One is to start using your personal network and start social selling, right? Like building up your personal brand in the marketplace, things on LinkedIn, things like that, where you have some visibility to potential employers. Start to network virtually with recruiters and hiring managers on the site, send them maybe a message or a connection request. It always goes a long way. And even in my personal life, trying to break into certain things that I weren't in, it always went a long way to hold myself up and really, I'm not a shameless promoter, but like, hey, if I want something, I've got to be willing to like say it and go after it. Right. And
Yes.
so building up your personal brand online, because that's really the first thing people see. I recommend one, tapping into your personal network, see who knows someone in the fintech space or the earned wage access space. And again, earned wage access space, there are a million companies out there. Someone's connected to someone. So start with your personal network. That's the easiest way to get into things. And then two, start building up your brand online and start getting to know people in the fintech space. I think additionally, there are a lot of great resources and a lot of great things you can go to. Like, for example, Sherm, Gartner, these sort of organizations have a lot of good information on fintech companies. They have a lot of good conferences where you meet people. Get involved, right? There's like low impact, low income kind of stuff where it doesn't cost you a lot. And then there are like the bigger conferences, but like a lot of fintech companies, it's a social industry. I go to conferences all the time. It seems like every other week I'm going somewhere. I'm going to Oklahoma tomorrow. We all see the same people at these conferences. It could be
Yeah.
tens of people and we all know each other. If you want to break into to some of these things, I would say get out there, put yourself out there, meet people, start socializing, start networking. And a lot of these fintech companies, what they're going through different raises, right? They're in accelerated growth mode. There's clearly a market fit. And if you want to get in, I think now is the time, whether it's a sales role or marketing or ops role. I pull up my LinkedIn and I see hiring managers in fintech and EWA posting jobs all the time. It's been happening. Again, these companies are in growth mode. So I would say just get out there, get involved and get connected. I think you have to, if you're outside of the industry, just come across as like just very humble and inquisitive and wanting to know more. Hey, I want to learn a little. I saw you have an opening. I want to learn about Daily Pay. Or I saw you have an opening. I want to learn about Pay Active. How can I get involved? How can I be considered? Like, here's my resume. Like, you have to be willing to do what other people won't and just really be aggressive with your connections and building your brand, and you'll get an opportunity. And I'm happy to talk to anyone about what we have at Rain. We are growing exponentially at Rain. We have key roles open in so many different areas.
That's amazing. So certainly, if people are wanting to look into Rain and talk to Aaron, you can find him on LinkedIn, Aaron Martin. And thank you, Aaron. I really appreciate all of the insights and advice that you've been able to share today. Appreciate you joining.
This was awesome. Thank you so much for doing this. And I look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching our podcast today. I'm Kristen Nielsen. I'm the owner of Copper Canvas Ads Agency, and we partner with fintechs to help them scale their business within a 12-month period. I've been in the industry for over 20 years, and I've seen how saturated the market can be, and therefore how difficult it can be to make your business stand out in a sea of other fintechs that may look similar or maybe even slightly different. But how do you make yours stand out? How do you get your message to the right people and those with high buying intent? That's what Copper Canvas Ads Agency is here to do. We are a growth partner, and we take a deep dive into your business to really understand what your strong points are, where there may be areas of weakness, and how we can fill those areas of weakness and create a plan to move forward in a strong way and really scale. So if you are interested, simply go to our website, coppercanvasadsagency.com, and schedule a time. There are buttons right there on the front page for you to book a time, and then we'll love to talk to you and see what we're able to do together.